So, what's new, man? What have you been up to?
I'm working on my mortgage business. I'm working on my tech company.
I was looking at that. So, tell me a little bit about the tech company. I want to start there with home.
Yeah, for sure. So, my background has really been in mortgage my entire career. I started in mortgage out of college in 1993.
Hmm.
And, there's always been this element of originating mortgages where real estate agents weren't involved in the process. So, you knew the buyer because as a loan originator, you're working with them on their loan, and they may have already known the seller in some way. Maybe it's a landlord they're buying the property from, or a family member, something like that. And so, as an originator on the front lines, you kind of know how the process works. You know the right people to plug in, the companies, the ingredients, if you will,
Hmm.
and you help them facilitate the transaction, and they avoid the cost of needing a real estate agent. And so that was always something that stuck with me through the years. I thought, why isn't it easier for somebody to sell their own home? You've heard of for sale by owner or FSBO, the acronym for it for a long time, but it seems kind of like a daunting task unless you're in the business, you're in an ancillary business like escrow or title or mortgage, to say like, Bo, you own your house and like, hey, I'm ready to move. I'm just going to sell my own home. You may not even know where to start. So I kind of poked around and, this is in 2018. I was kind of in a transitionary year for my business. And I was poking around online, seeing, what kind of resources are out there. And it just seemed like there were just books to read, or there was really no website that you could follow. There were some people that talked about it. It's almost like, for sale by owner by dummies,
Hmm.
type of
Yep.
thing. So I thought maybe there's an opportunity here. Technology's come a long way. I bet you that we could facilitate a transaction using technology and not and make it really easy to take this complex thing and take the kind of the mystery out of it using technology. And so what I used as kind of a template for that was how TurboTax took, filing complicated tax returns down to
Sure.
kind of a step by step. It asks questions, you answer it, it changes the following question. I thought we could do something, like that. And so that was the impetus behind developing HomePie. So, today, we've been in market for almost 4 years now. So where we sit today is we're a platform very much like other platforms that are out there, like Zillow and Realtor.com, Homes.com, Redfin, that sort of thing, where you can go on and search for homes, like them, share them. That similar experience, but all the homes that are on the site are listed by owner.
Mm.
That's the big difference.
Hmm.
Um, and with that, the most kind of outstanding features that we've put in place are the ease for somebody to list their own home. So if you've ever sold your own car and you've used like an auto trader,
Hmm.
you know how easy it is, right? You go on there and you kind of go through the selection and picking your car and the model, and it helps you through the way, right? And within a few minutes, you can upload some photos, set your price, and pay a fee, and you're live. So we took that model and we used that in a similar way where we bring in property data from public data information to help complete the process. So, like the square footage, the APN number, things of that nature. You can still upload your own photos or video. You can buy a professional package, which of course is recommended. You want to stand
Hmm.
out online, you have to have good photos.
Yep.
But within minutes, you can spin up a listing. Uh, then there's packages that you can get you on the MLS, to get additional help, to get, say, a pricing analysis. If you want more hand holding, you can do that. We do it at deeply discounted. So we basically can be your full virtual agent, like full service. We just don't come to the house, right?
Gotcha.
At a very deep discount. And so that's where it sits today for sellers. For buyers, what's awesome about this is after you find the property that you like, you connect directly with the seller on the platform. So we have instant messaging that goes back and forth. So one of the cool things is if you list your home online somewhere else today, And really, as far as big platforms go, Zillow's the only one you can list it on. And by the way, the listing is completely hidden from all of their listings. So
Right.
unless
It
you know
is.
how to get to it,
Yeah.
right. So you know this because you're in real
Yeah.
estate.
Yep.
Most people don't. So the people that do know are the ones that are in real estate agents.
Yeah.
And so you put your information out there, you put your phone number and all that, and all of a sudden it blows up with agents trying to get your listing. Well, we basically said, let's not do that. Let's not force people to put their information in the public. So you can only communicate with the seller if you register and you do it through our instant messaging on the system.
Mm.
So that's where the communication takes place. Plus, we have a scheduler, so you can schedule either a virtual walkthrough or an in-person. So you can select that, you communicate with the seller, and you can set that time and date. But once you've decided, like, this is the home and you want to write an offer, you literally go through a step-by-step process, and somebody can do this with no experience at all and create an offer, all the terms that go into the offer. The seller gets notified when the offer exists. They get a text, they get an email. They go in and they can counter that offer, accept or counter, each of the terms. So just like you would do offline in the normal kind of offer negotiation process, we've completely digitized that. That process goes back and forth until all terms are agreed to. So these are all terms like all the contingencies for appraisal and escrow and inspection and appraisal, all everything that would go into a standard offer. Once all terms are agreed to, right in line, right at the same time, you e-sign the documents. And so the beauty about that is there's always a digital ledger that can be audited. So you know if you're questioning how something was negotiated, you can always audit that. But when you get an escrow officer in escrow states or an attorney in an attorney state that gets those documents to help with the transaction itself, they no longer have to go through all the counter offers to figure out what the actual final terms were. So if you've ever been in a transaction where you've made an offer, you've gotten a counter, maybe you've gone back and forth 3 or 4 times, what has to happen in a physical sense after that is somebody has to look at those and see that, oh, it looks like in counter offer number 3, item number 4, it cancels out counter offer number 1, item number 2, because they renegotiated that, right? And so there's an element of human error that takes place with that, and you really have to scrutinize your escrow documents to make sure they match what the actual final term should be. And there's sometimes errors.
Sure.
Well, this avoids that, so it makes it really easy. And then we help them go all the way from contract to close over the finish line. So we've made
title and everything. You guys are handling the title.
we plug everything in. Well, we don't. So it's all outsourced. All that part's outsourced. We have TCs or transaction coordinators that help with the direct communication with both parties.
Yep.
Everything else is outsourced, but we help them every step of the way. So just like a transaction coordinator would help their real estate agent, we're doing the same thing, but we're doing that directly with the buyer or the seller, right? Now, mind you, we also have agents on the platform. So what we learned through this process of, since launch till now, is that up until now, about 70% of buyers engage in an agent early in the process. Like that's one of the first things they do. So they already have an agent. So early on, when we didn't build this to have agents on the platform, it was very clunky. The agent would come in and they'd pretend to be the buyer creating the offer. And then when it got to actually signing, we had to jump in manually and like redo things and resend them out. It was really, it didn't work. And so we went back and re-architect the software so that if you do have an agent, you can invite the agent to connect with you, or the agent can invite you as the buyer to connect with you. So once your accounts are connected, the agent leads them through the process, handles the negotiation, does all of that, but then the buyer signs. So it's really slick. Here's the other great thing that's really unbelievable, super hyper complex. But we did this for multiple offer situations. You can have, remember, early in the 2000s when you'd see 15, 20 offers on a property?
Yeah.
It gets really complex to manage that, right?
Sure.
And if you're a buyer and you're writing an offer and the listing agent isn't really communicating with you, it sucks.
Yeah.
Like, you know that you're competing, but you don't really know what's going on, and all of a sudden they tell you didn't win. Well, this opens that up and makes it really transparent for everybody, but still leaves the seller in the control. So all the offers come in, notifications go out saying this is a multiple offer situation. It makes people aware so they could up their game if they want to. It keeps everybody apprised of what's happening. The seller can still counter everybody separately. They can counter together. And at the end of the day, even if the buyers accept the counter offers, the seller is still given the final choice on who he wants.
Wow.
He or she. So hyper complex, really complicated software that we wrote that power up HomePie, but really practical. The agents that have come in and used this and have kind of conformed to it and don't like, there's some that want to just pull the negotiation outside the platform, but the ones that actually have done it have come back to us afterward and said, how can I use that for my business? That's how great it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what year did you start this again?
So the idea was really formed and, kind of started to map it out in 2018.
Okay.
2019, formed the company, started to build, hired the developers, started to build it. And we launched right at the beginning of COVID. And so we couldn't raise a lot of money.
It's an opportune time, right? Because real estate was so hot, right? I mean, people were buying left and right because rates were so incredibly low.
It was really good for that and really good for learning. It was really bad to raise money.
Yeah.
And so I put a lot of my own funds into this. I've got more than 7 figures invested, but I have raised a little bit of outside capital. But yeah, we learned a lot. I mean, that's really what 2020 and 2021 was, a lot of learning and redesigning and redoing. And for those people that are in the tech business, they understand this.
That's awesome. So how many transactions have you guys completed since you launched?
Over 1,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
and we were really only in California until about 1.5 years ago when we launched Florida. And we just recently opened up every state. So we don't have any traction in other states yet, but because we haven't done any marketing there, but we are available in every state now.
So people have to download HomePie in order to view and look at all of these homes, right?
No, it's just a website you go to from your mobile device or your browser.
Okay.
Everything's done, through the website itself.
That's awesome. Now, if somebody lists something on HomePie today, does it stay on HomePie or does it also hit Zillow or Realtor.com or anything like that?
Yeah, good question. So if they choose a marketing package that gets them on the MLS, then they'll show up on Zillow, they'll show up on homes.com, they'll show up on realtor.com and, like hundreds of other sites.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you think that the big lawsuit against the Realtor Association kind of helped this whole push?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's definitely given us a lot of attention. We've gotten a lot of publicity. Beginning about October of last year, our traffic increased dramatically and we didn't do anything different. So there's a lot more people looking online for other solutions. And there are more solutions coming out today than there have been in the last 4 or 5 years. But we've been around. We've learned a lot. So we've got a head start on most of them.
That's awesome. So if you're an agent that wants to utilize your platform, how are they getting compensated then?
So if you've got a buyer that wants to buy a property from one of our sellers, the seller, it's up to them what they want to offer in commissions. So just like any listing that a real estate agent would have, they offer commissions. A lot of that's going to change in August, with the commission changes. We plan on doing something very unique because of our platform, where we will actually have a term in the offer negotiation process that allows the buyer, the buyer's agent, to negotiate, to put into the contract, we want the seller to pay X amount for buyer's agent's commissions and have there be a negotiated term. I think something like that's going to happen even in the standard traditional offer negotiation process. But for us, it's easy. We're just going to digitize it. We're going to add that as another term. So a buyer's agent would get paid just like they get paid today through the seller offering to cover that commission. On the other hand, one of the other benefits that agents do get with us, we've got kind of a on our navigation bar, it talks. There's a button for agents. Is there are a certain number of people that think they want to sell their home on their own, but ultimately after trying, they decide not to.
Yeah.
So we've built a we've built a network of agents that we refer to. So in the case where a seller comes in and they try to sell it and they just get fatigued, or they just decide this isn't for me, I want somebody to help me with it, and they want somebody with boots on the ground in front of them instead of our virtual service, then we refer that out to an agent.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's such a
Yeah.
slick platform, man.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
So on the flip side of that, do you then leverage that platform to your mortgage company then for all of
Yeah,
the
there's a bit of
buyers?
that. Yeah, there's a bit of that. Not a lot. We haven't really exposed a ton of that yet. It's really, we've kind of taken a slow approach to this. Has been an endeavor of mine that's been kind of a side endeavor for a while. But the recent attention, the lawsuits, I just feel like we're at an inflection point. Getting a lot of potential investors reaching out to us, having conversations. We're taking those conversations to the next step. So very soon here, we could have an injection of capital to really take advantage of that, and then build out something very slick to build that bridge and offer something that makes it appealing for a buyer to use our mortgage services versus just going out there searching on their own.
So can you kind of lay out for the listeners, because I think there's a disconnect, or there's a lack of knowledge to the layman of exactly what is a mortgage broker compared to going to, I don't know, like, the bank, or I don't know, Lending Tree, whatever. Like how
Sure.
do you guys differentiate yourselves from everybody else? And how is a mortgage broker different than if a buyer just went straight to their local bank?
Yeah, great question. So traditionally, there's several different channels for mortgages. You've got your banks. The banks have very limited product. You typically work with somebody at the bank that really doesn't know a lot about mortgages, and they're just one tooth in the cog that takes you and then sends you off to the next step. So it's really tough to get all your answers day one from somebody at a bank. The rates, depending on the type of product you're looking for, may not be that aggressive. And if it's a product that they really want, they're very aggressive. For example, super jumbo loans. These are loans that exceed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. The banks are probably the best for those. They give the best interest rates. They want the deposit relationship. So they leverage that, those large loans with enticing interest rates to get the depository relationship and other things. On the other hand, they're limited product. So for example, we have a reverse mortgage division. Banks don't offer that. They don't offer, there's no bank that offers a reverse mortgage. Same with credit unions. They don't offer that product. They don't have non-QM. So non-QM is kind of the new subprime. It used to be called subprime. Now it's called non-QM. There are lots of variety of reasons for that. It's all nomenclature, but the non-QM would be those that don't fit the box of fully documented, great credit scores, just income that can be easily determined and so forth. So if you've got something where you need to qualify with your bank statements, or you've got lower credit scores, or you need to qualify based on the rental income of the property covering the payment. They call those DSCR loans, debt service coverage ratio. They're not going to offer all that. So very limited product. If you get declined, you got to start the process all over with another lender. So that's what kind of stinks about with banks. On the other hand, there's also what we call retail lenders. Retail lenders are like your loan depots, big mortgage companies. That's what they do. They're not depository. They're not a banking relationship. They got branches everywhere. They've got thousands of employees. The problem with them is that you're paying for it. They've got layers of management. We like to call them empty suits. Everybody likes to boss everybody around, but the only one doing the work is the one getting paid the least amount.
Sure.
And so you work with somebody who may be very good, and there are a lot of great retail loan officers out there, a ton of them, and they do a ton of business, but they get paid a sliver of what they would make elsewhere because there's so many layers of management that have their hand in the pot that the rates are just high. That when we compare rates when we're recruiting, and we're doing that with somebody from retail, we're typically between a half to 1 point better in rate. Not
Really?
fee, not points, but rate. There's that much of a discrepancy. They have a lot of overhead to cover. They have, physical offices and all sorts of things. So, there's a reason when they're advertising and they have their name on football stadiums and
Yep.
baseball stadiums, like that's money being spent. Well, where does that
Yeah.
come from? It comes from very frothy
Yep.
revenue in their interest rates. So,
Actually, I still call it Comiskey Park. So, like, I'm right outside of Chicago. I'm in Chicago, right? So, White Sox for me growing up was Comiskey Park. Now it's Rate Guarantee Field, which is the
yep, there you
worst
go.
name for a park,
Yep.
but it is what it is. But just to your point, that's their marketing, right? They're paying for all of that.
Guaranteed Rate is another one of the biggest, retail organizations. So, it's sad to see when we see these guys, and they do get hooked on it, but because they do offer a lot of support in those companies for the loan officers, but that they're paying for it. And you know who's really paying for it is the consumer
The
is,
consumer, yeah,
because they're paying a higher rate.
sure.
So then you've got your mortgage brokers, and I'll lump in there also what we call just mortgage banking. So brokers and banking, but they operate very similar. So mortgage brokers, they're independent. There are 100 different wholesale investors that are out there that do not accept loans from consumers, right? So you have to be a broker to send them the business. So think of it as like an insurance broker. You could go out and shop your car insurance to AAA and to State Farm, to Farmers, to Mercury, to all these, right? And you have to do the process with each one of them. Or you go to your insurance broker and they get a small fee, but they'll do all that for you. They'll find you the best rates, right? So it's similar in that sense. However, because the model is so efficient, being that most mortgage brokerages are their loan officers are virtual. They don't have offices and overhead to pay. There's not big layers of management to pay. You get a direct interest rate right from the wholesale lender. And wholesale lenders are competing to get your business. So they have to be sharp. So you're getting a much more direct interest rate with much less margin. And that's why we beat retail almost every day of the week. And so you also have the flexibility of product. Because we're brokers, we can go to wholesale lenders that specialize in non-QM or specialize in Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or specialize in FHA or VA, or specialize in reverse mortgages, or builder loans, or anything like that, right? Or investor, or fix and flip, or any of that. So we have a super large variety of product also. So our knowledge is more vast. So there's a real big benefit for a consumer to go directly to a broker. Now, being a banker is just kind of one level up from that, from brokers, meaning that brokers do not fund loans in their own name. So there are some restrictions. These are regulatory restrictions that they have from the Dodd-Frank Act that came out of the 2008 crash. There were these restrictions were put in place. When you fund your own loans in your own name, a lot of those restrictions are removed. So we have the ability to give you, say, lender credits to cover some closing costs. Brokers can't do that. We have the ability with certain types of loans, like VA loans, to offer additional credits that you wouldn't be able to as a broker. So there are some things that are really more beneficial to use a company that does fund its own loans, but operates like a broker in that they have a variety of different lenders they send their loans to, and they're not just keeping everything in-house with big margins. So that gives you kind of an idea of the different channels. If I were a buyer and I didn't know anybody in mortgage at all, didn't have somebody I was referred to, I would just jump online and look for a local mortgage broker.
And so you've been doing this for like 30 years, right?
Yeah, more than 30 years.
So how'd you even get started? What made you get started in this business?
Yeah, that goes back to when I was in college. I met my now wife of 31 years, and we were buying our first house, and I still had a little bit of college left to go to, and I had a business major, finance, and we were buying our house, and we sat down with a mortgage broker to get the loan. And this lady, I was like, gosh, I could do what she's doing. And so I started asking her about what she did, and she was very open. And she said, "You want to spend a day with me? I'll show you everything." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And I spent a day with her, and I'm like, "This is it. This is it. This is what I'm going to do." And so I got a minor in real estate. And by the time I graduated college, it was a little flawed. I should have been able to just apply for my broker's license. So there's two levels to licensing. There's a sales license
Sure.
in real estate where you have to hang your license with a broker, or a broker's license where you can own a company and have people that work for you.
Yep.
So I was one credit shy, or one class shy of getting my broker's license. So I graduated. That summer after I graduated, I took a correspondent course to get that one last credit I needed.
Okay.
And then I applied for my so I always had my broker's license. I didn't get a salesperson license, and I just got into mortgage, and that was it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when the crash of '08 hit, how hard was that for you? Because now you're a broker and you're doing mortgages. So that's a double whammy, right? That's two slaps to the face.
That was a big deal. Actually, at that time, I had a very large mortgage company. So in 1999, I started a company called Mortgage Corporation of America, and I grew that company over the course of just over 7 years into a 43-state organization. We did have corporate assets. We had properties that we had purchased. We had large corporate location. We were funding our own loans. We were writing our own mortgage product. I was securitizing them, selling to Wall Street. We had direct to consumer. We were running 30-minute infomercials on TV. Like this, it was a big deal. So when the wheels started to fall off the bus at the end of 2006, it was just like a domino effect, and I kept putting money in the company to chase it. I'd never experienced anything like that before. Honestly, I was pretty young. At that point, I was in my mid-30s, and hindsight's always 20/20. But after about 3 months of chasing it and going through massive layoffs and putting money in the company, my CFO came to me and said, "You can't do this anymore. You got to pull the plug. Like you're not going to be able to dig out of this." And I had 3 potential buyers of the company going into this that we were in due diligence with, that all pulled out. And so I thought that was going to be my safety net. First of all, that was going to be my generational wealth. So anyway, it turned into, okay, I just had to unplug it. In hindsight, I wish I would have kept the shell. We had all the right designations, approvals. It's been a big road and a big expense to get that back. But we had like our Fannie Mae seller servicer. We were, these are designations that take a long time and a lot of money to put together. But it is what it is. So I was in forced retirement for a few years after that.
So then now you're trying to restart that whole process. So what do you think, like looking back, I know you said you probably would have kept the shell, but could there have been anything that you could have done to keep pushing forward besides, obviously keeping the shell, or was the market just completely tanked that you were stuck? Because it was all kind of outside of your control, right?
It was. And I'll tell you what, I've got stories about just meetings with Wall Street investors and traders and so forth that would blow your mind. You ever see the movie The Big Short?
I was literally going to just bring that up. I love that movie.
Okay. It's about 90% accurate.
Yeah.
So for real, that's really what was happening. It was absolutely crazy. A lot of greed. You couldn't stop it. I would actually literally say to the traders that we worked with, like, how can you keep expanding this product? How can you go down to a 500 credit score with a 0 down loan? There's no skin in the game. Like, as soon as property values level out, God forbid they go down, the whole thing blows up. And they basically would say, if you don't like it, don't do business with us. That's literally the attitude. And so, um, if you tried to only do, let's say, super clean a paper product at that time, you
Mm-hmm.
had very little volume. So if
Mm.
you had built up a machine that needed the volume of business to survive and thrive, you had to have that variety of products. So you were kind of forced into it. Um, Greed drove everything, but hanging on to it, what was tough for me at the time is the lawsuits. We
Mm-hmm.
had the FBI in our office investigating files. Not that it was our fault, but there was a lot of straw buyers. There were a lot of things that were just they needed to figure out what was going on. So you had to participate. You had to help them. It was just really, really stressful. Of course, today, being a lot older than I was back then, and having seen what had transpired, I would have just kind of more laid back, gone through it, um, took my lumps, settled the accounts I needed to settle, and just kept it open and and restarted it. As soon as the dust settled. That's what I would have done had I had the knowledge I have today. But that's what we do. We live and we learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to something you just said a minute ago. So, a side question: at the height, how many total employees did you have?
Um, we had something like 700 in total
So you had said
between
earlier,
salespeople and yeah,
yeah, and originators and all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
So you had said earlier that you sat down with Wall Street and you needed to do a volume of business in order to keep your machine running, right? Because
yeah,
ultimately, like you said, you are a volume based game. It's not like you're dealing with high margins, right? You're dealing with lower margins, which are built on volume. And so
yep,
Wall Street tells you, hey, deal with it or not, right? And so I think one thing that frustrates me when you hear, especially out in the media, and most people think, like you said, it's greed, but what they don't understand is it's guys like you that are employing 700 people, right? And they're trying to put food on people's plates, roofs over their heads, and you're ultimately the result of people's shitty moves, right? And it's kind of like you said, The Big Short. And correct me if I'm wrong, but let me just kind of break down that whole thing, right? So what they used to do in the 70s is they would take all your A paper, lump it together, B paper, lump it together,
mhm,
right? And they would sell those out in the bond market. And then they started to blend it, right, into mortgage-backed securities. So you had A paper sitting with C paper and F paper and all of that. And so if you got all of these shitty notes in a mortgage-backed security, you don't have a good foundation. And when those start to crumble, the whole tower comes, right?
that's
But
right.
then on top of that, you had insurance companies that were doing what's the when you got to get insurance if you don't have
Mortgage
enough
insurance.
mortgage insurance. Yes, so people would have to go out and get mortgage insurance. So you had people like all these big insurance companies that were writing policies for these mortgages, right? So not only do you have the mortgages failing, but now you have the policies failing as well. And then what are they doing with all these mortgage-backed securities and this insurance policies? They're taking it out into Wall Street, and Wall Street is selling it to pension funds,
That's
right?
right.
401ks, all of that stuff. So everyone was like, the government should have never stepped in. The government should have never stepped in. And I'm not saying what they did was right or wrong, but all I know is if they didn't, we're talking people's entire life savings would have been completely wiped away.
Yeah,
Wiped away.
yeah, yeah. And if you remember, even at that time with the crash, I mean, the stock market was devalued by almost 50%.
Yeah.
So it already was. And for those that, I was in a position where I didn't have any income while things were crashing. And so
Mm-hmm.
my assets were tied up in the markets, were also losing value. And that's what I was living on. And so I'm just a small microcosm
Yeah.
of what was going on out there. But this was the panic of the time, and it was deep. It cut very deep for everybody. But your understanding of what happened is pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Crazy times. And
it
I
was.
here's the funny thing is I can remember when it happened, I said, you watch, the multifamily industry is now going to explode. And now we're entering a multifamily bubble, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got all of these people that went out in the last 4 or 5 years when rates were so low, getting bridge loans right, that had floating rates, and now those come due, and
That's right.
rates are now 8, 9, 10% for these bridge loans, and they don't have the cash flow to support it.
No, you're right. They have to extend them, and there's other
Yeah.
things that are going on there. But uh, yeah, I mean, just look at even the commercial market, office building space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of pain there.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, physical malls, were really getting beat.
Yeah.
There seems to be a bit of a comeback there. You know, people like to get out and they actually like to go to stores,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not everywhere.
Right.
But yeah, look, this is real estate. This is the game we got in.
Yeah.
It's cyclical. It's great when it's great, and it really sucks when it sucks.
Yeah.
Like you get the high of the highs and the low of the lows. And some people have the best timing and they get in when it's
Mm-hmm.
low and they sell when it's high, and others don't. And maybe this time around I do.
So what's next? What's besides HomePie and continuing to build the mortgage business? What else is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, look, that's really it for me. Those are my two big things. I do a lot of other stuff. Fitness is big for me, health, family. I've been fortunate to raise three great kids, and two of the three live near me still. One did move away, but just a lot of time. Look, life is short, and so I have really good life balance.
Good.
Um,
Which is hard to
I
do.
It is hard, but I learned my lesson when I was young. I used to miss my dinners at home, and the kids would already be asleep when I get home and that type of thing. Not that I didn't always carved out time for vacations,
Mm-hmm.
but the daily being there was tough. In my 20s and my 30s, I was really about business, and there's some benefit to that, and I almost reaped the full benefit, but with things out of control, out of your own control, you've got to take daily control.
Sure.
And so, I make time every day to work out, to exercise. I make time to, communicate with my family and do things together, and vacation and that sort of thing. And so that is the third leg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, last thing before we leave, what would be your advice to people starting their own business?
Yeah. Get a really good mentor and listen and follow. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to bump into your own doors. If you have a really good mentor, find somebody that you see being successful, that does the thing that you like to do, and volunteer your time with them.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, just volunteer your time. Tell them you want to help, you want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You want to help them. And it should be altruistic. You want to do what you can to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And in return, the knowledge you gain in that period of time is immeasurable. You couldn't pay for that same knowledge. You couldn't go to school and get that same knowledge. That'd be the number one recommendation I'd have.
Just think of how different your life would be if that lady didn't offer to let you spend a day with her. The trajectory
Right.
of your life would have been completely different.
That's right.
Yeah, you're 100% on.
Spot on.
Brad, thanks so much, man. This was so much fun. I love your story, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bo. Good
All
to
right,
meet you.
buddy. Yeah, we'll talk to you.